How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Excellent. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Well, thanks for thanks for reaching out to the show. It's great to run into you, and I'm looking forward to getting into the music.
Yeah, awesome.
So let's begin our conversation before we get into the new album by asking you this. 4 years ago when this whole pandemic began, it really went through the musician community in a very specific way. So how did you make it through that time period, and how did it subsequently change the way that you approach things?
Well, I actually put out my debut record. My release day was like the day that my whole province, Newfoundland, Labrador, Canada, shut down. So it was like the concert hall we were at, it was open the night before and then it was closed.
Yeah.
And so it was like, dresses are steamed and amps are rented and like we were ready. And I used to be really into large ensemble stuff and I still am. So when I, was gonna make my own solo record, I was like, I'm gonna use all my writing chops, and I had horns and I had strings and I had a choir. There was like 90 something people on my record. And then I rearranged it for 27 people so that it would fit on the stage. So that, it was like, then you have to re-rehearse the whole thing and then it was canceled. And then on the 1-year anniversary of the record, I was gonna put it on the stage again. And then it was like the second wave and it was canceled again. And there was just no way that I could make it work and follow like the social distancing rules or all those things. And so, yeah, it was really disappointing.
Yeah.
I think I had made lots of other records and that was my first one. That was like my solo record. And I put maybe even like too much blood, sweat, and tears into it. And then when it all gets canceled, you're like, why did I try so hard? Like, what was that even for, And then there was so much of like, okay, now I just need this string thing. And you spend forever in the string things and you get the strings and you record the strings. Like, great, now let's turn it down to like 20%. And now when you look at how great MIDI sounds are or program sounds, like when stuff is so quiet in the mix, it's like, did I really need a string quartet on that?
Right.
Like how necessary for the amount of expense and how difficult it was to translate it to live, was it really worth it? So I mean, I guess it depends on who you ask and what your priorities are. But for this time, I was like, I really want to make sure we can go on the road and we can fit on the stage. And it's just not making it more complicated than it needs to be. So this time I've got a core group of 8 people on this record. So it's quite different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think about Charlie Parker with strings. I mean, when you do add strings to it, it just absolutely adds a whole other lush element to it. And I notice for as much music as I get, that anytime there's a level of orchestration with strings, that's kind of the underbelly, it's not right prominent, it just adds to it. So I personally, if you have an artistic vision, even if it seems like it's over the top, I don't think that that's the way it is. And another further example of that is the way the musician hears the music from the stage versus the audience. We don't hear the nuances. We don't get into it. But if you don't have that level of wanting something to be as good as it can be, it's gonna affect your lineage from there on out. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I think it's essential, but also, having a large band is in any time is always difficult. I can't imagine during COVID how crazy that would have been.
I just kind of gave up on the project. I was like, you
Yeah.
know what? I'm done with this now. I made the record I wanted to make. I'm proud of it. But it's cool. I can let it rest now. And that was a concept album. Like it was all about the stages of grief. So it was like, I don't know. I was doing my own therapy with this record, I'm not gonna lie. And it really did what I wanted it to do. And I guess where I was kind of going on a roller coaster of emotions with the whole thing, and I wanted it to be linear and like tell a story in a certain way. So having all those different textures and stuff to play with, like I'm glad I didn't know
Yeah.
that it was never gonna see the light of day, like other than Spotify or whatever. I'm glad I didn't know because I wouldn't have done it that way. And when I look back, it's like, yeah, that is the record that I wanted to make. And now I've got a totally different record that I wanted to make.
Which is where I want to lead into next. You got the perfect AI soundtrack, Love Songs for Good Machines. Talk to me about this. How did you change from the debut? How did you modify? What was the vision for this?
Well, with this record, there's a common theme, I guess, that I don't even know if I really realized it was there, but the songs are all about regular people living their regular lives, looking for love and meaning in a world that often like equates our value to our productivity, like what they can get for us or what we can contribute. And I just wanted to highlight just like the beauty that comes from everyday life and those things. And yeah, and just that we're not our work. We're not defined by our work. And so with this thing, a lot of it is really jazz based, but it's pretty pop influenced as well, especially when it comes to like the mixing and the production of things. And then I wanted the stories to be timeless. So I put a lot of thought into the instrumentation of it. I was like, I really don't want more than 10 people at any given time. So there was a choice of having people who are multi-instrumentalists. So when you listen to the record, you'll hear, oh, here's this lush horn thing, and then here's this lush vocal thing, but they're not at the same time. And it's because it's the same people. So like my horn players are my backup singers, and like my electric guitar player is also playing percussion sometimes. So people are real multitaskers, which is really fun actually. Everyone keeps busy, no one's standing around for too long. And then yeah, everyone kind of got to contribute with like how we choose like texture and tone and stuff to match like what the story is trying to say. So there was really strategic, put a lot of thought into what instruments we were going to use, like what would serve every song, so they have instrumentation throughout, and then how do we choose that so that it serves the story. And with my first album, there was a lot of like, okay, well, this song is this part of the story, and this song is this part of the story, and this song is this part of the story, and they each had their own kind of life, and so it's a little bit eclectic in some ways. But in this one, I was, really cognizant of the order and things, and it was like, okay, well, this whole record is a story. So how does it flow? Yeah, so there was so much time in pre-production and arranging and thinking and planning before I even invited anybody in to play a note. But it really made it so that when we were ready to dive in, there was space, because all that kind of pre-work had kind of been done, that people got to play. They got to play with the ideas and the sounds, and yeah, and everyone got to fill their creative buckets, I think, a little bit, not just me. So I was like, okay, here's the song, here's the horn arrangement, here's the whatever. But then for this thing, I just want you to think about the story and play like you. And so people really got to add their own little bits to everything. So I think it was a good creative experience for everyone, I think.
So ultimately, at the end of the day, what are you hoping the listener gets from this project?
I hope that the listener feels validated in some of the feelings that they have, because I think that a lot of us feel that way right now in the society, where sometimes it feels like laws are moving backwards, and things that we've declared a long time ago to be everyday rights and needs are just seeming farther and farther out of reach. And then we have to work harder and harder, sometimes for less pay, and then that pay doesn't go as far as it used to, that it just seems like the everyday life is just a little bit more of a struggle than it was 30 years ago, even 20 years ago. Like it feels like life is getting progressively harder for like the everyday working person. And everyone I've talked to sort of along this project kind of feels the same way. So the stories are inspired by my own experiences and like, stories of people that I know and are around me, but I try to be metaphorical enough with the language and like the poetry that these songs can resonate with everyone. So there's a saying, where are you? Are you in Kansas?
Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah.
Because I don't know if I've ever talked to anybody in Kansas before.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, so I'm from an isolated island, like on the east coast of Canada, and we have a lot of our own dialects and stuff, and our own words that sometimes I don't know if they're Newfoundland words or not, but we have to say like a good machine is like something that you have for a really long time, might like break down, but you fix it, it doesn't wear out. Like a truck you've had for like
Yeah.
20 years, it's like it's all rusty, but it's still going.
Uh-huh.
And or like a tool that's been fixed a bunch of times that used to have a plastic hand, now it has a wooden handle, but it's still going. It's like, oh, that's a good machine. And this sort of idea behind that saying is that you only really see the value in things, that you honor things after they're worn out
Yeah.
and after they've lasted longer or given more than they're actually designed to. So the idea was sort of to frame people in that way as they might be viewed by employers or governments or like whatever, that we're here to do a task, right? To produce something, and that our value will only be celebrated once we've given more than we're designed to, or we're finally worn out for good and we're retiring, and you know, who knows how much you've got left to give in your life and your family. Yeah, so the idea of being a good machine is like not just that we are you know, like some part of some sort of corporate machine, is that us ourselves, like, like she's a good machine, and not just that we would want to not just that we are that, and we want to riot against it, is that also within these systems we want to be good machines. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, tell me I'm a good worker, like throw me a retirement party, tell me I went above and beyond, like I worked 70 hours this week, somebody celebrate me. And so it's not even just acknowledging that we are that, but also like that we know that system is broken, but we still want to be really good at it. And we still want people to tell us that we're good at it, and we want to be the best machine. So just also just challenging that idea and that system as well, that that like, why do we want to be machines at all? Like, why do we
Right.
want to be that? Yeah, so that was sort of long-winded, but that's the
N-
idea.
No, that's great. I'm glad you did that. Yeah, it's interesting how much in this modern era we've tried to simplify life by making things more convenient. And I think by proxy, we've made it more complex and more difficult. You know,
Yeah.
there's too many things. Like I think about when I was a kid, when you went to the grocery store, there was like two or three kinds of mustard. Now there's like 50 million kinds. Every single thing that you want, there's like all of this litany of decisions. But I got to tell you, in the Canadian frame of mind, so it's a guy from Kansas City. I got to tell you, I love the way the Canadians roll. I love socialized medicine. I love the fact that artists get grants all the time. So the government just doesn't merely say that they support the arts, they support the arts. And I've always been very, very cognizant of that. But I got to tell you, one of my favorite musicians of all time, his name is Patrick Watson. He's from Montreal. He has an
Mhm.
album called Love Songs for Robots. So when I saw this title,
Oh, no way.
yeah,
Cool.
have you heard Patrick Watson?
No, I
Oh
never
my
heard of
God.
them.
He's amazing. Absolutely amazing. His voice, his orchestration, everything he does. He is, speaking of strings, speaking of lush arrangements, man, this guy's got a corner on it. So check him out.
I can't believe there's an album called Love Songs for Robots. That's
Y-
so cool. I wonder if
Yeah,
he's like my long lost brother or something.
yeah,
You
right.
know?
That's what I'm saying. When I saw this, I was like,
Wow. Yeah,
wait,
I had no idea.
that's
That's
not
really
Patrick.
cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So, and he's up there in Canada, so he's in the neighborhood, so to speak. So, um, yeah, right.
Actually very far, but you know, yeah, that's good to know. I like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna check, and I won't
So,
forget the album. So that's
right,
great.
exactly. Yeah, there's no way you will. So,
No.
let me ask you this. How did this journey into the music begin for you? Take me back to your roots, influences. How did all of this become who you are today?
Oh my goodness. How much time do you have?
We
I'm
we
just
gotta squeeze your whole life into 10 seconds.
I'm from a small town in Newfoundland called Stephenville. It's like on the west coast of the island, so like really far from the city. And working class family. My dad's an electrician. My mom had a restaurant. You know, I spent a lot of time peeling potatoes as a kid, and like while other kids were going on the soccer trip or doing whatever, I was like washing dishes like a lot, you know, in the restaurant. And so I was very cognizant of that. But also my family is all musicians. My parents play, my sisters play. A lot of them are like playing at the pub down the road or at the fundraiser, or like guitar songs around the campfire. But we've always sung songs together. And we still do that. Like try to see each other whenever we can. We don't live in the same place, but we try to get together at least once a year. And there's a lot of singing and stuff going on. So that was always a part of it. But when I was really young, I had this weird thing. Like I had I sound like this all the time, but I couldn't sing. I was one of those kids that like when you're in choir and like the choir teacher says like, okay, you just mouth the words or whatever. That was me. So I was in this family full of these beautiful singers, and you know, where it just came really naturally, and I wanted to be a part of that. I'm the youngest of all the kids and stuff too, so you know, you always want to be like your big sisters, and I just just couldn't do it. I didn't really understand it. I didn't really understand how it was. Anyway, I was having all these like breathing troubles and ended up having this surgery to get, and then it was like, oh my God, is this what the world sounds like? Like I realized that like my ears were plugged and my nose was affecting not just my voice, but how I heard everything. I didn't even know what my own voice sounded like. And everything sounded like it, one ear was clogged more than the other. So things sounded out of tune with themselves. I would hear things in like almost like a different pitch. And I thought the whole world sounded like a quarter tone happening at once.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a huge light bulb, but that wasn't until I was 15. But when I was a kid and I wanted to play, I recognized that I wasn't a great performer. And people were not shy to tell me that either. And I really focused on playing instruments. I played piano and the saxophone. I played like in school band and writing. And I've just always really liked writing poetry and writing stories. And I started writing songs when I was like 9 years old. I think I wrote my very first song. It was like a library week. And I was like, I'll write a song about the library, and recorded it on my little 4-track tape. I still have it somewhere. It's the silliest, cutest little thing, but I like gave it to my school. It's like, here's a song for the library for you.
Yeah.
And as much as like there's that sad little kid there who thinks they can't sing, like still somewhere like in the back of my head, it was actually kind of a blessing it turned out that way, because I don't think I would have leaned so hard into writing if performing came naturally to me,
Yeah.
I think. And so it kind of started there. I studied jazz at St. FX. I was a music teacher for a while. I work at a venue. I'm on my lunch break at the venue I work at right now. And yeah, I'm turning 40 this year, so I'm a little bit of a late bloomer when it comes to putting out my own music. But I studied arranging and composing in music school, and I spent a long time writing for other people's records. I'll just like arrange people's strings, or arrange for choirs or like theater companies, symphony, which was always really great, and I really loved it. And it wasn't until I lost somebody who was really close to me, and I had wrote all these songs about grief and just for myself, and then I put them away for like 3 years. It was like I wasn't, and then I saw this thing. I was like, oh, here's this grant deadline. I was like, I could make a record sometime. I wrote all those songs. I wonder what those are like. And I just dug them up to look. I was like, oh, I actually think these are kind of good. And it was this I wrote the grant application in 2 hours, I think. I was like, blah, blah, blah. This probably won't get approved anyway, whatever. And I got it. And I was like, okay, I guess now I have to make a record. And so it was one of those things that like, I don't know if that's a route I would have really chosen for myself, because it forced me to like get up in front of everybody and sing in front of everybody. And when you get told like a lot when you're a little kid that you're no good, that kind of stuff sticks with you sometimes. So I was always more comfortable, conducting or like doing just like writing for people. So it kind of forced me out of my comfort zone with this sort of series of events. Don't know if I would have done that otherwise. So yeah, it was sort of like, I know I'm older for a person who's putting out records and like kind of just sort of like an emerging artist at 40 years old, but I feel like it was kind of meant to happen that way. So I'm cool with it.
Well, I think it's inspirational. I think it's emblematic of the jazz community. If there was ever a term, it's always late bloomer. Jazz comes later in life. I know it did for me. I mean, I didn't get kind of blue until I was in my 20s, and I'd listened to music my whole life. And then there was this thing that apparently came out of a spaceship, and I was like, what is that sound? And then that was the fascination. That was the beginning of it. But I think there is something very charming, and I think there's something that exemplifies the grit of the jazz community, which is it's never too late to get to that point where you're going to chase your dream and you're going to do what you want to do with your life. And you have to find that calling. Sometimes it takes a while. It's like finding your voice. Sometimes it takes a long time for a musician to find their voice. They have to really kind of go through the woodshedding and the stage presence and all of that to find out where they're at. So speaking of that notion, what was the first live jazz show that you saw that blew you away?
Oh my goodness. Blew me away. When I was like 20. So being from a very small town, and I realized I like jazz because I'd be like watching Christmas music movies, and I'd be like, what is this? It's like Ella Fitzgerald's on, like, what is this? Whatever this is, I love it. You're like, that's called jazz. You're like, well, I need that. And then you go to Walmart because like that's the only store in your town, and you're like looking for the jazz, and it's like in the bin, the $2 bin, and you get like the Memorial album, Ella Fitzgerald. And so there's like, the songs that I was like, this is jazz and I love it. It was like a Tisket a Task. It's like the Chick Webb era, like that's the kind of stuff. And so there was a lot that I just wasn't exposed to. When I think back at it now, it's actually like totally bananas that I even got into the jazz school I got into for how little background I actually had in it. But so there was a lot, like when I first went to St. FX in Nova Scotia, that I was just like, oh, there's actually this way more complicated layer to all of this music that I didn't realize. And then some friends and I decided to go to Montreal Jazz Fest. And my family, especially my older sister, are huge Joni Mitchell fans. They're more into like the folk era of Joni Mitchell. And then I got into like the later years just myself, like on my own kind of thing. And so I was like, I really liked Wayne Shorter by default for all the
Mhm.
stuff that he was doing with Joni and how like the singer song, I always admire her as a songwriter, and then the kind of relationship and the conversations that happen between singers and saxophonists was just like, really inspiring for me. So into Montreal Jazz Festival and got to see Wayne Shorter live, and it was just incredible. And he was actually just doing the signing afterwards, and it wasn't Joni Mitchell tunes. He was playing his own stuff, and it was pretty out there. There was a lot of like free things happening, and some of it was just utter chaos, but you could really see like the conversations and the connections that were happening between people, and the ability to be vulnerable live on stage like that and like go somewhere where they didn't know it was going, and then finding our way back to each other in interesting ways. And I had never really seen anything like that before in a live setting. And I don't think I really realized how deep like improvisation
Yeah.
can go, and how powerful vulnerability can be in musical situations when you're willing to just go for something, not knowing where it's gonna go. So I found that to be incredibly inspiring. And so I met him after the show, and I was just like, I don't know, I was like 20, and I was just like, oh my God, it's inspiration, blah, 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 blah. And I was just being the most obnoxious little kid. And he was like, well, you know what I think is amazing? And I was like, what? Tell me everything. And it's just like being born human at all instead of something else. And I was like, yeah, that's really cool. And I was like, you know what? I'm not prepared for a conversation with Wayne Shorter. I gotta get out of here. There's actually a really funny photo. I should send it to you of like me like posing with Wayne Shorter. And I'm just like, and he's like, oh, this kid.
That's awesome. Have
I
you
just
seen?
sent it to you. It's really funny.
Please do. Yeah, that's fascinating, and that's the way his brain works. Have you seen on Amazon they have a movie that they made out of him? Really well done, and it's his entire musical journey. You should watch it. But
I should.
that's the kind of cat he was. He thought in a whole different way.
Yeah, I used to love like watching interviews and stuff with him. There, he'd be like, "Well, how do you do this? And how do you like, where does all your inspiration come from?" And he's just like, "Inspiration hits me every day at 9 a.m. when I sit down at the piano and do
Uh-huh.
stuff." He's basically just like, I'm working, I'm showing up and doing my work. But he just had this way of just be like, "This is just how it is." And yeah, it's so grounding for someone who is such a visionary, I think, as a
Yeah.
composer, player, who really changed the way that people think about writing and improvising. I think he, it's just a huge inspiration that he had just this way of simplifying everything that made it just feel like it was no big deal.
Yeah. He had a
Yeah.
very plaintive way of putting deep things out there where it's like, yeah, why wouldn't you think that too? That kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's humbling and also grounding, but like not condescending. He does not
Right.
make me
No,
feel
not
stuff.
at
He's
all.
just like, yeah. And yeah, still think about Wayne Shorter a lot, honestly. Just like like those bracelets. I want like a what would
Uh,
Wayne do?
yeah, exactly, exactly. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, fans, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I'm a mom and I'm tired and I'm a workaholic. Um, and I'm a relentless creative. Just that no matter what I'm doing, whether it's in like my day job that I also really love, or with my family, or when I get to make art, that I'm always sort of thinking about how I could be doing it different, or how I could be doing it better, or how can we adjust these things, or how can it serve me or someone else better, that my brain is always trying to make something.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm a carer. Like I love my family more than anything, and I love my community, and I love to help people. I'm a carer and a maker.
I
And
love
that's
it.
it.
That's great. So the new album is Love Songs for Good Machines. If anyone wants to pick it up proper, see you live, delve into your world further, where's the best place to do that?
Sure. So all my music is on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, like all those places. For the album, like the physical copies, it's only available at Fred's Records. You can get it at Fred's Records online, and they ship anywhere in the world. And so, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, which is probably a lot of your listenership, it is like the oldest record store like in Canada, and it's downtown St. John's. And it is like run by the same people and like looks the same as it has for years. And there's a lot of us. They're huge supporters of our music scene. And, it's like when you're in a smaller city in an isolated area and you're a record store. So there's a lot of us who are like, the record store does a lot to support us. And then we also really want to support our local record store and make sure it stays alive. So I'm selling my album vinyl and CD exclusively through Fred's Records. So you can order it online and we'll ship anywhere in the world.
It's a lot like Record Store Day, that notion of keeping the indie kind of record stores alive.
Yeah, and St. John's, Newfoundland, like every day is record store day. Like we love Fred's Records every day.
I love it.
And yeah, so I've got my big album release concert coming up this Friday, June the 14th at the newly restored Majestic Theater. And we've got some stuff happening with Sound Symposium this summer. And there's some secret tour plans in the works. And I'll be able to share them soon. But I'm Natasha Blackwood on Instagram, Facebook, was like natashablackwood.com. So if anyone wants to stay in the loop, you can follow me there.
Excellent. This has been wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with the album.
Thank you. So nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.